Hello, hello. This is Tamara Hergert. I'm the founder of the Empowered Artist Community, and today I have Leigh Witherell, and she is an amazing artist. Her work is out of this world, dynamic, and it's just really interesting. So if you want to see her work, go to her Instagram account. It's down in the description, and she explores the topic of intimacy and these profound moments that people have, at their most intimate selves. All right. So, Leigh, tell me about your journey. So, I know you have the degree in arts, and walk me through your artistic journey real quick.
Okay, so my journey actually started in college. I actually have my bachelor's and my master's are in literature, but I have a minor in fine art. And I needed like an elective and it sounded fun. And come to find out, I like really liked it. I always liked it as a kid, but I never thought about doing it. So I spent a lot of years as a college professor teaching literature. Art was just kind of an aside. So when we moved to Florida from Ohio, I didn't want to go back to teaching. And my husband's like, well, why don't you do your art? Just get back into that. And I had never shown before. I had never done, nobody even knew I did art. My husband's whole family, we've been married 37 years. They didn't even know. None of them. My mom and my sister knew. My husband knew. My children knew. Nobody else knew. I mean, I kept it very private. But when we lost our daughter to a car accident 4 years ago. Now, she was an artist herself, and she had always wanted me to show my art. She was very encouraging about that. And I thought, I'm going to. I mean, I got back in my studio. It was my haven. It was where I felt connected with her. And I thought, I'm just going to do it. And I joined a little tiny local art show at this little local gallery named O Gallery. And it was great. And the ladies were wonderful. And it was a great place to heal and to really get into that art community. But I started out doing fluid art because fluid art is all about chaos. And I felt like I needed to embrace that because I felt like I always tried to have too much control. But really quickly, I got back into my figurative art. I've always been fascinated with the human body. I think drawing women, especially, just, as nature intended us to be, it's beautiful. No matter what size, it doesn't matter. It's just we're all shapes and sizes and shadows. It's wonderful.
I agree.
Yeah. So I got back into it, but I live in a very conservative part of Florida right now. So nude models, they're not around. They just, just not around. So I had to start making my own compositions and coming up with like digital renderings so that I would have that visual reference. I'm not that artist that can just do things off the top of my head. I need that visual. And that's how I started doing that. And so I shifted back into the figures and they really started gaining traction.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until 2024 that things really took off. And I think the difference was that my husband helped me put together my website. I started looking at some wonderful examples. There's a gentleman in Belgium named Julien de Lagrange, and he does the CAI YouTube channel, and it's contemporary art issues. And he has all these wonderful videos and he does all these wonderful things. And he'll even do mentoring sessions with people. And that was integral in getting my website to go from looking like a hobbyist to looking like a professional artist website. Then I also joined the Art Ladder out of London for their mentoring program because they teach the business side of art, which is not something people teach. And one of those things they teach is about Instagram. And one of the things that they said about Instagram, which I really caught on to, was that your Instagram needs to be about your art, not your personal life. I had a bad habit of mixing both. And so I separated my accounts, one professional, one personal. And I think I had, this is so funny. In June of last year, I had like maybe 3,000 followers. And I thought, oh, yay. And my husband and I went on to see our son in Sacramento, our son and daughter-in-law. They live in Sacramento. And we had a layover in Los Angeles and my phone started exploding. It just started blowing up with notices. And my husband's like, what is going on? I'm like, I have no idea. I didn't even know my Instagram had a notice on it on my phone, but it did. And I found it. And I'm like, what has happened? Between us getting on the airplane in Florida, in Orlando, and landing in Los Angeles, 10,000 people had started following me. And I'm like, I don't know. And we get to Sacramento, and our son, he's 35, and he says, "Well, did you buy followers?" And I said, "Can you do that?" And he goes, "Well, that answers that question." So I was like, no. But something went viral, and I still don't know what went viral, but one of them went viral, and I think it was probably a reel. And so since then, since I started gaining all these followers really fast, I started thinking really hard about, okay, so how can you make this better? How can you capitalize on this? So I started posting some of the things that I was doing in progress. And I got to tell you, if you do nudes, and I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to argue with a bot on Meta forever. I have to argue for everything that gets posted. I have to argue with something that's not even a human being. And I'm like, wow, because none of my stuff, I don't do shocking art. So it's not but they're like, you're violating our blah, blah, blah standards. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm really not. But I do reels. Sometimes I do like the in progress shots. And I'm figuring out that algorithm, but the algorithm's always changing. So you're constantly trying to stay ahead of an artificial intelligence. And
Yeah.
I'm like, it's exhausting, exhausting. What I see young artists, and I see this especially among like younger artists, they'll come out of school or they'll do whatever they're doing, and the first thing they start doing is they start following those Instagram trends. The ones where you turn your back to the camera and then you turn around really slowly to reveal your picture and things
Oh,
like
yes.
that. Yeah, it's cute, it's really nice, but that tends to put off collectors and buyers and gallerists, because what they tend to think is you're just following trends, and that means probably in your art is just following trends. And so you won't see any of that on my Instagram. And the Instagram is curated pretty carefully so that everything, you can tell that it's me, you can tell it's mine. There's very few things on my Instagram that people would go, well, that's different. There's very few things on there like that. But I will sometimes put family shots on there because my family is a big part of support, and things like that. And it's really funny because like I said, I barely pay attention to my personal anymore. It's all about the business one. I barely pay attention, but it's just kept growing incrementally. It's just kept growing. And I think some of it is bots, but the engagement that you get is what really tells the story. And the engagement just keeps going up. And for some reason, the Latin America has really come into play. And I'm like, all right, because you can do the analytics on the business.
Yes.
Yeah, you can do that. And so there's a lot of people in Brazil. There's a lot, and I'm just like, all right, And I wish that I wish I had a better answer for that. I wish there was a formula. I did step 1, 2, 3, but I got on an airplane and I went to Los Angeles and then to Sacramento. That's all I did.
I think there is this threshold that most people tend to have a really hard time getting over, like the first 1,000 followers, and then your next hump is the 3,000 followers. And once you're over three, it just gets exponentially easy. Just
Yeah.
people like just want to follow you because other people are following you. Like getting to that first 3,000, it's probably the hardest thing. But once you do, it just becomes a
Yes.
breezier
It
journey.
is. And the problem is too, is that you have to be careful about who's following you, because you really need like gallerists to follow you. You need buyers to follow you, collectors to follow you. And once that starts, it just catches on like wildfire. And before you know it, you've got all kinds of things. I think one thing and this is actually really good. One thing that I think artists can do that help them so much on Instagram is you really have to choose. Do you want to be like what I am, which is a professional artist? So I'm not an influencer. I don't care about being anything like that. I really don't. Or do you want to be that? Do you want to be that influencer? Because either one is valid. Whichever one makes you happy, that's the one you need to do. I'm in that age group to where being an influencer, not all that comfortable for me. I'm okay. I'm like, I don't think I can do that. But I think that once you make that decision, it does tend to inform what you're putting on Instagram. And it does tend to inform where your Instagram goes. My algorithm tends to go towards the museums, the galleries, the collectors, things like that. Whereas I think an influencer's Instagram would tend to go towards brands and towards experiences and towards that type of thing. And probably that will probably get you paid quicker than what I'm doing, because art is this path is a marathon with no end in sight. There's no finish line. So getting paid is an issue. I'm lucky because my husband has always made a really good living for us. So I really don't have to worry about that. I'm in a very small group that's a very minority. And I do recognize that. And I'm always very appreciative of that. And if you're not in that minority, you may need to go for, I need to get paid and I want to do art. And so there would be a different path. So yeah, but that's my Instagram story. I'm going to stick to
All
it.
right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. So what was your follower count last year?
My follower count last year, I want to say it started out at somewhere, maybe it was less than 10 when it started out, for sure. It was like around 3,000 in January.
Mhm.
And it kind of just hovered around there until that June, at the end of June. And in 1 month, it went from that to just I couldn't even keep up. I was like, I don't even know. By the end of that summer, there was like 20 something. And then by the end of like in the middle of the fall, there was like 30 something. And now it's at like 42. But I am noticing that the numbers, they fluctuate. They go up and down. And I think if I was more about influencing, I think I would be very worried about that fluctuation, going up and down. But because I'm not worried about influencing, I don't really worry about that. But it's frustrating because Meta is such a frustrating platform. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just random. And I think it's there for us to beat our heads against a wall, because social media is a beast that most of us don't want to have to mess with, but we have to mess with it because through social media is how I've gotten all the other things that I'm doing. Most of it's coming through social media. And those gallerists and those judges and those, art agents, they're watching Instagram. And that's where they find most of their new talent comes out of social media. So you have to have it. There's just no getting around it. And it sucks. There's no getting
Yeah.
around it.
Your subject matter, it has some nudity, but it's not the explicit content. I would not call it that way. No,
Right.
in no shape or form. It is a really measured way of, yeah,
That's on purpose because I don't want people to feel like my art is like shouting at them.
yes,
I just want them to be able to look at it, and I don't want them to get what I see. I want them to really feel what they feel and see what they see.
yeah,
So it's all about that connection. So I'm trying to make it to where they do that. And I think especially with women in my age group, I think a lot of us, we didn't grow up with like what I raised my daughter and what my daughter-in-law was raised with. We kind of grew up with that mentality of, you do high school, you might do college, you get married, you have children, blah, blah. My grandmother, I remember her being very confused when I said I was going to go back and get my master's degree, because she literally said, but why? You're already married. I'm like, well, yeah, but I want to do other things, but it was very confusing to her because I had already fulfilled the purpose that she knew to be a woman's purpose, and women can do so much more. And especially, and now with the current political environment we have going on, with the new administration and with all of those things coming out, there's a really large chance that we're going to go back, we are going backwards
yeah,
in rights, and they're focusing on groups, and I'm just like, why are you even focusing? What do these people do to you? Seriously,
yeah,
just leave people alone and just be happy, just let people go.
yeah,
But that's what the new series is focusing on. It's focusing on how us as women, especially, we're just kind of being shoved into the background like we used to be. Because I don't know if you know much about the history of this country, but there was not too long ago, we're talking the 1950s, women couldn't have a checking account. We couldn't buy a car. We couldn't do a business. We could not have a credit card. And if we worked outside the house, we had to have our paychecks were paid to our husbands' names. They had to deposit it. That's how that was. And then when the women's rights movement and the civil rights movement happened, that started to change. But that's why we have that glass ceiling still in this country. So the new stuff that's coming out right now, which has actually started to really catch on already, I've gotten 3 pieces done in this, and all 3 of them are already committed to shows. So they're heading to different parts of the country for shows. And then there's more. I've got more on the easel and more in, the sketchbook and the digitals to do. So I feel like it's got a purpose. So, but even the art before that, before all of this, I feel like the purpose was to really look at that intimacy and that longing that a lot of women, I think, feel because we're raised with that Disney princess mentality for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And real life just can't compare to that. It just doesn't. And if you grew up with a mother who read like romance novels or something like that, that was even worse. Men just can't compete with that, number one. I mean, my husband flat out looked at me. I got really sick when I was in my late 20s and kind of was bedridden for a while. And my next door neighbors, the Kolakowski sisters, they were elderly women and they had a basement filled with romance novels. And they bought the novel based on the picture on the cover. So the hotter the guy, the more they wanted to read it. And I'm like, you ladies are like 85. What are you doing? But they just started bringing over these books for me to read. And being a lit professor, I devoured books. It didn't matter. I read really fast. My husband finally came to me one day and he said, you have to start reading these books. And I'm like, why? And he goes, I don't ride a horse. I don't have long hair. He goes, I'm not a pirate. He said, I don't have some kingly. He said, I can't compete with these men. Well, yeah, okay. So I did.
You know,
Yeah, he's like, my hair will never blow in the wind like these guys do. It's not gonna
I
happen.
think he has a point.
But yeah, it is. It's a good point. It's valid. I had to give him his props. It is valid,
Mhm.
very valid point. But I think that a lot of women, I think that is in the back of our mind. That is kind of what we kind of maybe long for and yearn for. But I think what we don't understand is that with life not really being like that, we have to look at what's in front of us, and that's better. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. I think that's one of the reasons the divorce rate could be so high,
Yeah.
maybe. Those expectations aren't met.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When I look at your paintings, I always wonder what is their story?
That was the other thing that the art letter taught me about that was they're like, you gotta share that story. I was always afraid if I shared the story that it would color what the viewer is seeing. But it's actually the opposite. It doesn't. It enhances what they're seeing. So like if you take an example, I just sold this one this year and it was a big 5x5 canvas and it was called The Lover's Kiss. And what it was a woman from the back view and the man was fully clothed, but they were embracing and it looked like she met him at the door and just like dropped the robe is what it
Hmm.
looked like. Right. And the whole point behind that was about empowerment and about loving that body that you're in, no matter what. I mean, she had kind of a big butt, and there was a purpose for that. She needed to. There was a purpose, because it's just about having that confidence and taking that control, and not saying that the men should have all the control and the men should always instigate and all this stuff. And it was based off of a much more famous painting, a classic painting from way back called The Kiss. And in The Kiss, he's embracing her and he's got her in that classic bend thing
Hmm.
and she's totally helpless to his advances. And that painting always bothered me because of that, because it looked like she didn't have any sort of say in what was happening. I mean, she may have been completely 100% for this. I don't know. But in this one, in that interpretation, I wanted it to be clear that this woman, she knew what she was doing. And she knew that he was going to melt the minute that he saw her. And I was hoping that that's what came through in the canvas. And the collector that bought it said that's what came through in the canvas. So I'm like, yay.
I love it. Love it.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to share those
Yeah.
stories more.
So I just wanted to thank you again for coming to join me today. And guys, check out Leigh's Instagram and take a look at her website. It's definitely worth visiting. Again, I want to invite everybody to also go check out our website. We have a whole bunch of resources, guides, and listen to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.